On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV.
Tonight on Piers Morgan Uncensored, Her Majesty's final journey. The late Queen's coffin makes its way to Buckingham Palace. Millions are expected to see her lie in state. Harry is banned from wearing military uniform at the vigil. Disgraced Prince Andrew can wear his full regalia. How can that be right? Plus, Ukraine punches back. Putin's war is in disarray, but how deadly will his counterstrike possibly be?
Live from London, this is Piers Morgan Uncensored.
Well, good evening. I'm Piers Morgan. It's going to be a very emotional night tonight. As I speak, the hearse carrying the late Queen Elizabeth II is moving slowly from Northolt in West London to Buckingham Palace, of course, her world-famous residence. It'll be the last time that the Queen's body will ever be at the palace. She'll be there overnight, and then she'll be moved to lie in state. Members of the royal family are going to be at the palace to greet her, and she'll be arriving sometime in the next few minutes, and we'll, of course, bring you that news when we get it. But it's been a really moving day from the very morning that it all started up in Scotland, of course, where she'd been lying in state at St Giles's Cathedral in Edinburgh. She was then taken by the RAF by plane down to Northolt, and tonight her coffin will lie in rest in the Bow Room, where she greeted countless visiting heads of state. And tomorrow she'll lie in state at Westminster Hall, where millions, potentially, are expected to come and try to see her, many of them queuing overnight. Well, I'm joined now by Talk TV's political editor, Kate McCann, and Talk TV royal editor, Sarah Hewson. Let's start with you, Sarah. You're down there at Buckingham Palace, waiting for what is going to be a truly historic and emotional moment, isn't it? This is the great Queen, arguably the greatest of all queens, going back to Buckingham Palace, the sort of epicentre of the royal family to the world, for the last time.
Yes, and Piers, what's really striking as I stand here is how quiet it is. There is a huge crowd that has gathered to witness the Queen's final journey in through those famous gates of Buckingham Palace. And yet they are standing there in silence, umbrellas up, waiting quietly. They've been waiting for some time now, many of them queued for hours to get a position to see this moment in history. The atmosphere is incredibly sombre. I've been here throughout the week at Piers, and the atmosphere's changed from day to day, but today you just feel that mood has come down, that people are here in quiet reflection, waiting for this moment to say goodbye to the Queen. And she will shortly be driven through those gates of Buckingham Palace into her official London residence, that home that is so associated with the monarchy and the crown and the Queen. And there she will rest in the Bow Room at Buckingham Palace until tomorrow, when at 2:22 she will make her way on a gun carriage slowly through the streets of London to Westminster Hall to lie in state and allow more people to pay their respects.
So, Sarah, I mean, I was coming into work here in Ealing in West London, and I couldn't work out why the traffic was so bad. And then I looked out, it was pouring the rain. I looked out and I just saw the streets were lined with people and police. And I suddenly realised this was the route from Northolt into the centre of London, into Buckingham Palace. And there were so many people and so many police, and everyone was very quiet, everyone was very respectful, but it was chucking it down with rain. And it was a very poignant scene, actually, that so many people, so many of the Queen's subjects were just waiting quietly. We're seeing now live footage here, actually, of the hearse arriving at Buckingham Palace. This is Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. This is her final journey back to Buckingham Palace tonight. Thousands of people there outside the palace waiting for this. And there is the hearse. And she'll be greeted, we understand, by all of the senior royals, pretty much. Her children and her grandchildren and their wives, and I think some nieces and nephews as well. And they'll be greeting this remarkable woman at the palace for the last time. And she'll spend the night there. And then tomorrow the public will get their chance to pay their respects, as the people in Scotland, of course, have been doing the last 2 days. But it's pretty poignant, this, isn't it? This is a remarkable moment involving this extraordinary woman. It's very hard not to be very moved by this.
Before, well, now the crowd are bursting into spontaneous applause as that hearse passed by. It sent a shiver down my spine. It really is quite a moment. The atmosphere here, it's hard to describe as that hearse drove through in the darkness, in the rain, and the Queen making her final journey. And of course there have been so many moments over the course of the past couple of days, from Balmoral to Edinburgh, today from Edinburgh to London, and now this journey from RAF Northolt to Buckingham Palace.
OK, Sarah, well, listen, we'll keep a watch on that, and we'll see what happens over the next few minutes, see if we can see the hearse being met by members of the family. I want to go down to Kate McCann, who's in Westminster. Kate, obviously the Queen will spend this last night at her great palace, and then tomorrow she'll move to Westminster Abbey, where she will lie in state for 4 days. And some people have been queuing all day already just to get the chance to walk past and have their few seconds a few feet away from Her Majesty. Well, what's it been like down there?
Yeah, the mood in Westminster is a really interesting one. In some parts of Westminster, there is really frenzied activity preparing for what will be a huge influx of people who want to come and pay their last respects. And then at the queuing sites, where people are already starting to set up those tents, some of them have gazebos, everybody kind of coming together in not quite a celebratory mood, but a sombre one, whilst at the same time knowing that what they are witnessing is a real moment in history, and they are really incredible royal fans, the people who are already there. They are in the rain. It is pretty miserable. It's on the side of the river. There's not a lot down there, but there will be, Piers, because there is a huge plan to make sure that all those many thousands of people, maybe as many as 1 million, who decide to queue over the next couple of days, will be well catered for. There will be loos down there. There'll be access to food and drink. You'll get a wristband if you want to leave that queue. And the intention is to try and get as many people through as possible. The atmosphere, though, inside Westminster Hall, that incredibly historic part of the palace, will be still and crucially silent. You won't be allowed to take photos or videos, and the palace is asking people to dress in sombre clothing to reflect, really, the sense of occasion that it will be inside that palace when people go and pay their last respects to the late Queen.
Right, and Kate, meanwhile, our new king has continued his travels around the United Kingdom and today Northern Ireland. That was a very significant trip, wasn't it?
It was, and it's interesting that we are describing the mood at these occasions, because we know what the ceremony looks like and we kind of know what some of the formalities are, but it's always the mood that's fascinating. And in Northern Ireland today, that was one of the things that everybody was holding their breath to watch, because there has been such huge tension over time in that part of the world. And remember, the Queen played such a significant role in really trying to ease some of that pressure and tension in 2011 and 2012, shaking hands with Martin McGuinness, for example. Those were seen as crucial moments, that she was really the only person who could make those steps and move things forward. And that was really appreciated, that soft power, if you like. She didn't overstep. She made exactly the right move at exactly the right time. And I think there had been some tension trying to understand whether King Charles will be able to do the same thing. And so that warning today from the Stormont Speaker, Sinn Féin's Alex Maskey, essentially one which towed the line between saying, we welcome you here, we are very happy to see you, we support you and we share in your grief, but also just remember the tensions here and really how difficult it is to try and unite all parts in what will be a difficult period. There is no Stormont Assembly at the moment. There is a key issue around Brexit and the Northern Irish Protocol, which is yet to be resolved. And King Charles, he's been there 40 times before, but of course never as king. His first visit, which set the tone today, he made it very clear that he recognised the power of the monarch, what his Queen had done before him, and that he intends to follow in her footsteps.
Kate McCann, thank you very much indeed. Well, I'm joined now by former newspaper editor Emily Sheffield, Talk TV's legendary contributor Adam Bolton, and the chair of the Confederation of British Industry, Lord Bilimorio. Thank you very much indeed, all of you, for coming. Lord Bilimorio, let me start with you. You knew the royal family. You've known the Queen before she died. You've known the new king and his Queen consort. What are your reflections on the last few days?
Yes, just to clarify, I'm past president of the CBI. I've just completed my term. I've been very lucky. From my earliest, I was born and brought up in India, and my father was a commander-in-chief of the Central Army in India. When he was a young captain, he was ADC, aide-de-camp to the first president of India, Rajendra Prasad. And there are pictures of my house from my early memories, including now, if you go to my house, family house in India, of my father, my mother, with the Queen, with the Duke of Edinburgh on the state visit in 1961. And little did I think that fast forward, and I would actually have the privilege of not just meeting them, but meeting them many, many times and getting to know them, and as well as Prince Charles now, King Charles III. And it's been extraordinary. I mean, it's been an amazing inspiration. One of the things that people don't talk about enough is the devotion between the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh. She used to refer to him as her rock.
Yes.
And I remember once coming out of the Zoroastrian Parsi community, which I'm a patron of here in the UK, one of the tiniest minority communities in the world, in Harrow. We went into the prayer room with the Duke of Edinburgh, had to take our shoes off. We came out of the prayer room, and we're both sitting next to each other, tying our shoelaces, and he turned around to me and said, you know, I've had these shoes from the day I was married. And that was the sort of sentimentality that existed between the two of them. And sadly, he passed away last year, and very soon after that, you know, you saw her starting to use a walking stick. And,
yeah, I don't think she ever really recovered from losing Philip, actually. So I've written a column for The Sun tonight about Prince Charles. I keep saying this. Everyone does, don't they? King Charles III. I've rarely seen any public figure rise to such momentous occasion, I don't think, in the way that he does. And as always, you write a column like that, and it certainly it will stand the test of time. But there was a moment today which I think just showed that underneath this exterior, which he's putting on, is a man that's just lost the mother that he loved, coming so soon after the father that he loved, under enormous pressure to hit the right tone and hit it running as our new monarch. And there was this moment where he went to sign an official document today with his ink pen, and this is how he reacted.
I just had a bit. Is it September 12th?
13, sir.
Oh, God, I'm the wrong date. 13?
Yes, sir.
You said 12 earlier.
Where did I go to? I was something 10. Oh, God, I hate this.
Oh, look, it's going everywhere. Hang on. So nobody got it wrong.
Where is that?
Oh, look, it's everywhere.
How dare this bloody thing? What are they doing? Everyone's stinking.
I mean, this is for CBS News, this footage. I mean, I was surprised that we get to see that, actually. I think he should have been better protected. But it was an insight just into behind the veneer is a man who's under enormous pressure, both personally and professionally.
Well, yesterday I was privileged to be in Westminster Hall, that was just being spoken about. This 900-year-old hall, one of the oldest parts of this country. I mean, along with Windsor Castle and the Tower of London, you have Westminster Hall and Westminster Abbey. These are the ancient parts of our country. And he spoke about that and how much it meant to him. And with all of us, Lords and members of Parliament over there, and you could see how moved he was. And actually, I saw a photograph today which showed that he was in tears during that occasion.
But Emily, that little snapshot there of him slightly losing his temper about a faulty pen, I just thought it just showed us that beneath all this, there must be a torrent of emotions raging inside this new king.
I'm sure, because he's probably also exhausted.
Yeah.
What I was interested to get more detail on today, which was George Bush's daughter was over to interview him. Was over here to interview the new Queen consort. And clearly they were not expecting the Queen to pass away, where my reading had slightly been that because our king had been with her all week, that they were concerned. So I think this really did come as a shock. I don't think they were expecting. So he will also be suffering still from the shock. And you don't... I imagine the amount that he's having to deal with and present himself, the speeches, becoming king, I doubt he's had any time to... I don't like using the word process, but in a way, as you say, he's not...
To properly grieve.
He's
how can he? He's
they
on
haven't
public...
had much, and I am surprised...
I mean, the world's cameras, Adam, aren't they? They're focused on this man now and his wife, Camilla. relentlessly from the second they appear in public, and they're having to appear in public all the time whilst going through what I would imagine is pretty intense grief.
Well, I agree with that, but on the other hand, the reason why the world's cameras are there is because, as the Queen said, you need to be seen, that these rituals that they're going through visiting the 4 nations of the country are important in terms of establishing the monarch as the head of state of all the United Kingdom. And, you know, I'm afraid my reaction looking at that footage, and I know all the pressures that you've mentioned and all the undoubted genuine grief, is my reaction is the Queen wouldn't have behaved like that.
Right.
And she would have made a joke of it. And
she probably wouldn't have actually had that happen in front of a camera. I mean, that's the thing. I'm surprised that he's not been better protected.
No, these signing ceremonies are part of the whole deal. I mean, that's why they're taking place. I mean, we saw, I don't know whether Lord Burnham was there, but at the accession ceremony, everyone who was there signed a document in public, and quite a lot.
But only CBS cameras were capturing that moment, and I'm just surprised we've been able to see it, because it does show a moment away from what we're seeing. I mean, he loses.
But I mean, I'm afraid I do think these instances, these off-camera moments, can be quite revealing about
they can
what
be, but I think we should
really
cut him
like.
some slack. I want to talk, if I may, Lord Burnham. There's this issue about how far do you go to show the Queen respect in cancelling things. There's been a whole slew of things cancelled. The football was all cancelled at the weekend, but the cricket, the racing, the golf all went on and showed a respectful moment of silence and applause and then moved on, which I felt was the right way to handle it. What do you think about this? Centre Parks today, for example, have suddenly decided they're going to stop everything on Monday, on the day of the funeral, and remove every family who's on holiday there and tell them they've got to leave, which seems to me completely outrageous and the very last thing that Her Majesty would have wanted.
What has happened over here is you've got a figure that has sort of risen above all other people in the world in many ways for 70 years, and you've got this individual as monarch of all monarchs, the queen of all queens, that is not just the most famous monarch in the world, but the most respected. I mean, I've received messages from every corner of the world.
So do you think Centre Parks were right?
So I'm saying that people, if you look at the sentiment that people are expressing, look at the people who've started queuing to pay respects in Westminster Hall from yesterday. I remember yesterday when I went to swear my oath, I was told, one of the peers said, do you realise people have started...
But when you have a massive holiday company with a load of people who pay good money and they're told they have to leave all these parks around the country, I think that is a ridiculous way of supposedly showing the Queen respect.
I think what you're seeing is companies, frankly, using it as a bit of an excuse. I mean, I've had 2 of those, you know, those things when you phone up and you get a recorded message, 2 of them saying, oh, well, we can't get your message today because of the circumstances. And, you know, we know people, I think it was in Norwich, closed bicycle parking spaces as a market.
Well, there's food banks in Wimbledon are being closed on Monday. And that caused outrage of people saying, well, let me get this straight. We're going to be shutting down food banks for the most desperate, hungry people in the country, whilst at the same time the reason given is because there's a funeral for one of the richest people in the world.
The only thing I would say, and I don't know whether quite how it works out, but rightly it's been called a bank holiday on Monday, a day for everyone to show their respect. And I think some companies may have contractual things with their employees about them not being there at bank holidays and all that kind of stuff.
And also maybe not wanting to be accused of not allowing their employees to mourn their Queen.
Emily, I wanted to talk to you about Princess Anne, who put out a statement just before we came on air saying how fortunate she felt to share the last 24 hours of my dearest mother's life. It's been an honour and a privilege to accompany her on her final journeys. Witnessing the love and respect shown by so many on the show has been both humbling and uplifting. We will all share unique memories. I offer my thanks to each and every one who shares our sense of loss. And she then goes on to say that she offers, very grateful for the support and understanding offered to her dear brother Charles as he accepts the added responsibilities of the monarch. To my mother, the Queen, thank you. I do think in many ways Anne is the most like her mother of all the other royals, actually. And watching her following her mother's hearse all around the country has been incredibly moving. I find, just watching...
They're incredibly moving. I think if you hear anyone talking about the royals, Anne is the unsung heroine.
Yes.
She's the hardest working royal.
The least celebrity
She's the least celebrity. She works the hardest. She doesn't chase the media.
Yeah.
She's never got caught in any kind of scandal. I mean, there may have been some when she was incredibly young, but
it's a few marriages.
Been a few. No, one marriage. Now there's a second. I mean, and her children are exemplary. So I think a lot of people have a huge amount of affection for Princess Anne.
She's. I mean, again, I've been lucky and privileged to see this firsthand. And her private secretary, who retired recently, he always used to say, "I've got the hardest working boss in the world," and it was real. She worked. Really,
I think she's totally a real
that sense of
beauty.
beauty.
And that, well, you say unsung. I mean, her title, the Princess Royal, was recognition, really. From,
no, I know. I just don't think she ever
role.
gets the attention that a lot of the other royals get, and she should get more attention. I think she's been.
Not sure she's that keen on the attention.
No, I think that's right. Yeah, Lord Billy Moore, just quickly about the economy. Everything's on hold this week in terms of the economy, and yet we know that ticking away is a gigantic financial crisis, a huge energy crisis, a lot of uncertainty in Ukraine. We're going to talk about that a little later in the programme, where it seems like the Ukrainians are making moves against the Russians successfully, but what will that inspire from Putin in terms of retaliatory action? All this uncertainty will make things more difficult financially for this country. What state are we in?
Well, actually, if you think about it right now, what's happened, it's unprecedented that last week you have a new prime minister and a new monarch in 1 week. And what a test of a country to see how resilient you are, that we all come together and you have this amazing transition that is taking place now, where we're all sad. I mean, we love the Queen and we're all sad.
Actually, if anything, suspending everything for 10 days will make the economic situation underneath all this worse.
What this is showing is the advantage of having a monarchy. One of the biggest advantages of a republic is you have this continuity in somebody who's apolitical, objective.
How does that help the economy?
It helps the economy in a big way because you have this stability, this constance, this steadfastness through that figure.
But that won't pay the bills, will it?
It will help a lot. It helps our economy. It helps our country. The soft power that the Queen gave our country.
But with your old CBI president hat on, how bad is the economic situation right now in this country?
The economic situation is dire. I mean,
as bad as you've ever seen it?
The energy crisis, it is as bad because you've had 2 years of a pandemic, then the sad war in Ukraine, it's crisis after crisis, then the unsettlement of Brexit, which started in 2016. So for 6 years in a row, we've had challenges that we've had to cope with. Now, I think the energy crisis, the good news is the government has said we're going to have a cap for consumers. They've got a plan for businesses. The big issue is the government has realised now that they helped during the pandemic, £400 billion. I kept saying, don't stop. You need to keep helping consumers and businesses. You can't suddenly say, I have no money. And Liz Truss is saying that she's...
Do you think she's on the right track?
Absolutely on the right track. Focusing on growth, focusing on incentivising investment, focusing on now saying, I'm going to help you, the cap of £2,500. These are all the right measures.
Lord Billy Moore, great to see you today. Thank you very much. You guys are coming back a little later, I think, so stay with us. Coming next, Prince Harry's been banned from wearing military uniform at this week's ceremonies, but disgraced Prince Andrew apparently will be allowed to at least one event. Is it fair? Should we care? Debating that with Prince Andrew's friend, Lady Victoria Hervey, and the author Petronella Wyatt. Well, welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored. Whatever your views about Prince Harry's treatment of his father, our new king, and of the royal family, his military service is beyond dispute. 10 years in the British Army, 2 tours of Afghanistan. He was a war hero, but Harry won't be allowed to wear military uniform at ceremonial events marking the death of his grandmother, the late Queen. Prince Andrew, on the other hand, will be at least one of the events, a vigil. The Duke will apparently don naval attire for her final vigil in Westminster Hall. He, of course, did serve in the Falklands War, but he also recently paid a woman he claims he never met up to $10 million to make a court case involving alleged sex abuse go away. So the unpopular prince can't dress up, but the disgraced Duke can. You might be as bemused as me as to where the line is on this. I'm joined now by journalist and author Petronella Wyatt and socialite and aristocrat Lady Victoria Hardwick. Welcome to both of you. Might be the poshest panel I've ever had.
Thank you.
I'm called Piers and I'm the least posh person here. What do you think, Lady Victoria Bayes? I don't understand it. Personally, I've got no truck with Harry at the moment. I think he behaves like an imbecile most of the times. However, I don't begrudge him the right to wear a military uniform after 10 years serving his country. And unlike his uncle Andrew, he has not been involved in a really disgraceful scandal.
But he did desert his country. You know,
he left the country, yes.
But he sort of decided he basically wanted to completely leave this country and go to America, which is the worst timing. Why do that when your grandmother is the Queen and she is in her last years of her life? Like,
but that's a different argument to me. The argument is about...
But why is he allowed? Well, one served 10 years, one served 20 years. One
is disgraced and one has just behaved quite badly.
I think actually both of them should be allowed to wear them because this is such a huge event and I think everything should be put aside and they should both be able to use.
What do you think?
Well, first of all, nobody's actually got to the real point of this is whose decision was it? And I believe it was the Queen's decision.
Yes, of course it was the Queen.
And this is what I'm hearing. Technically, Harry cannot wear... It's actually against the law for Harry to wear military uniform.
Against the law?
Yes. You can look it up. Yeah, it's actually against the law because he was stripped of all his military titles. And veterans, who are simply veterans, cannot wear military uniform. So my father, who fought in the First World War, could not have worn a military uniform.
It was very interesting. When I tweeted, I thought Harry should be allowed to. A lot of veterans actually did reply saying he shouldn't. Actually.
Well, technically he shouldn't. Andrew was not stripped of his military titles. He was sort of forced into retiring from him. But
that's semantics, isn't it?
That is semantics.
I just think it sticks. I honestly think it sticks in the gullet. I think of most of the British people.
What sticks in the gullet?
If Andrew's allowed to wear a uniform, why the hell can't Harry?
Look, what sticks in the gullet?
That's the bottom line.
I do feel a little bit sorry for Harry, although, you know, it's a different circumstances. You know, Prince Andrew did not desert his country and go and move to America.
Prince Andrew paid a woman he says he never met $10 million.
Where did you get 10 million from? That figure is completely
you keep
made
saying
up.
You're the only person who says it wasn't 10 million.
Harry did not desert his country. That's a ridiculous
left to
statement.
America as his...
That's not desert. He did not desert the army.
When even I am defending Prince Harry about something,
exactly.
It must be pretty unprecedented.
Piers and I are very, very anti-Harry and Meghan.
Right.
And the thing that upsets me most about this is the ammunition it will give to the Meghan brigade. And all their mad Twitter supporters. And I think the story at the moment should be not about trivial quarrels about uniforms, but on unity and on grief.
Oprah Winfrey popped up yesterday.
Well, no, because...
Hang on, let me finish. She popped up yesterday saying she hopes that the family, that the death of the Queen can now heal the rift in the royal family. And I'm like,
needs to stay away.
I thought, are you kidding me? You're the one that started the rift.
She is the reason.
You enabled these two to go on national television and let them, without challenging any of their statements, let them spray gun the royals.
When Prince Philip was dying in hospital, while he was literally dying, they did that interview.
Yeah, well, they weren't aware that he was literally dying.
They all say he was dying. He's 99 years old in the hospital. Come on.
I think that's slightly irrelevant, but I do agree
I'm more interested in Oprah's hypocrisy, where she says, I hope they heal the rift. Well, Oprah, you did nothing
what I want to raise
seriously evil.
It's not only Oprah, it's American hypocrisy, because the assault on the Queen and the royal family itself is coming from the now radical left New York Times, which has hired a bunch of lefty English journalists to bash the Queen.
To them?
Nobody in this country is listening to them. Nobody. But what we don't want at this time are silly media stories about rifts within the royal family.
Well, the problem is there are actually rifts in the royal family. When you see the four of them together in this footage we're looking at now, we all know that this footage is misleading. There's no rapprochement between them.
William and Harry hate each other's guts.
Right.
And let's be frank about it.
Why did he tell you that?
I have sources who know, but at the moment they certainly do.
Is there any way back for Andrew into public life after what happened?
Absolutely not.
You think there is?
I think gradually. I don't think it's going to happen overnight.
Gradually, but he'll be dead before it happens.
Well, he's not that old.
He's not that old, but I can't see him.
Why would he be dead?
Should he be allowed back?
No, there's no public appetite, especially.
How is someone like you, who's a journalist, how can a journalist go and tell someone in the royal family what to do? Like, what gives you?
Because I'm paid to.
We pay. But also, hang on, Victoria.
What gives you the right
we pay for them. That's the right we have.
Exactly.
We pay for them.
But what
you
right
pay taxes.
You
pay for the royal family.
I'm so sick of people saying what right have journalists to give their
when a journalist can go, oh, well, he has to do this. Like,
don't talk over each other. Here's my point. The reason we're allowed to say what we like about the royal family, actually, is because we all pay taxes here, and that pays for them. They live off our money. So, of course, we're allowed to have an opinion about all of them. That's the whole point. That goes with the territory. My issue about Andrew is, I think that Charles and William have decided there's no way back for him, certainly for a long time. And that may be just the end of it. They won't let him appear in public.
I think people should stop guessing.
Don't talk over each other.
I'm trying. I want to tell you a story. About 8-9 months ago, the Queen gave Andrew a lump sum money because she understood perfectly. Yes, he was one of her favourite children, but she understood perfectly that there's no future for him under King Charles. None whatsoever. Charles would never let him back. William would never let him back. There's no return, which is why she wanted to make sure he was financially secure.
And what about...
there was this lump sum handed over.
I'm sure that's probably right.
I just find it so fascinating how, like, people at newspapers seem to know every little detail and...
It's
people
our
that
job.
actually... No, I know, but it's like so much of it is made up. So much,
exactly.
So much of it is just like a little fantasy in your head.
No, it's not a fantasy, actually.
It's all fantasy. A lot of it gets briefed by people.
Just like how the amount that Virginia was supposedly paid, it went from 10 million.
Let's be clear.
Then it went to 3 million.
Let's be clear. Andrew paid millions of dollars, inarguably, to a woman he said he'd never met to make a civil case go away in which he was accused of sexually abusing her. And that's why the British public doesn't want him back. He paid millions of dollars.
It was 3 million. 3 million is not a lot of money to tell someone to go away.
Right now, in the worst cost of living crisis this country's ever had, saying $3 million is not a lot of money is tone deaf and not reading the room.
Right,
got to leave it there.
Anyway, OK.
Guys, I have to leave it there.
Let's change the subject.
Thank you both very much indeed for joining me. Well, coming next, Ukraine defies the odds again with a massive counteroffensive. It's Putin's war and his regime now on the brink of collapse. Defence experts on both sides of the Atlantic have their say next. One of them warns we could be closer than ever to a nuclear strike.
This is Talk TV.
Welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored. The world's attention has quite rightly been focused on the late Queen. It's a momentous turning point in our history, in world history. But while our eyes have been temporarily averted, something extraordinary has been happening in Ukraine. The Ukrainians are defying the odds again. And before we talk more about Her Majesty or anything else, I just want to pay tribute to these Ukrainians, because while we mourn our late Queen, Ukrainians are mourning their fathers, brothers, sisters and daughters every single day. As we come together to remember what makes our country great, Ukrainians are fighting and dying just to make sure their country still exists next year. Thousands of Ukrainians have been liberated this week in a massive sucker punch counterattack in the south and the east. It's been quite remarkable. Many said it couldn't be done. The Ukraine just didn't have the numbers, but in tanks from trenches, with brute force and unimaginable bravery, the Russian flag has been torn down. Ukraine has taken back more than 2,000 square miles of its country. This is the biggest turning point in the war since Putin's invaders were battered away from Kyiv at the very start. And make no mistake, it's not the end, nowhere near, but it does show yet again what remarkably resilient people these Ukrainians are. And it's crucial they can build up from a position of this new strength. So now more than ever, even though our thoughts are rightly here and our late great Queen, we should remember we must continue to back Ukraine. We must give President Zelensky what he needs. The late Queen's coffin was carried to London today on the same RAF plane that's been used to deliver British weapons and British aid to Ukraine. Two very different services of duty, but both, I think, equally important. Joining me now to discuss that is in Ukraine is former US Secretary of Defence under President Trump, Mark Esper, and Chair of the House of Commons Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood. And here's my pack, brilliant pack, Emily and Adam, from earlier. So thank you for rejoining me. Tobias Ellwood, before we get to this, I just want to ask you, on the back of that last debate, this issue of Prince Harry and Andrew and whether they should be allowed to wear military uniforms during this week of events in memory of the Queen. What's your view of this?
I don't have a strong view on that. My focus is on the transition and making sure that we give the King all the support is provided. Some big decisions need to be made, leadership-wise, on Britain's place in the world. We have a new Prime Minister, a new King. There's an absence of leadership on the international stage. It's not really coming from America. We've been hesitant, a little bit risk-averse across the West now. I just want to focus on making sure that we invest in our armed forces. And as you rightly point out, do not forget what is going on in Ukraine, because it's moved into a very, very dangerous chapter. You're absolutely right to congratulate the Ukrainian forces. Putin made a calculation that he thought the nation would collapse when he invaded. He was absolutely wrong there, but he was right on assuming that the West would sit on his hands, that the West would not want to get directly involved. We've left Ukraine to do the fighting. And now that there's been this massive surge, incredible advance, a counterattack by the Ukrainians, we must not kid ourselves that somehow Putin is defeated. This is his worst setback as a president, politically and militarily. I suspect he's going to come out fighting, and it could get very, very ugly indeed.
All right, Dr. Mark Esper, I mean, there's no doubt it could, but there's also no doubt that what has been happening in the last 2 or 3 days in Ukraine is quite extraordinary.
No, that's right. And first of all, let me echo your comments about the Ukrainians. They have showed great skill and courage and grit in fighting the Russians, and on the front lines of what I think is the autocracies versus democracies of the 21st century. So I think they've done an outstanding job. But you're right, the turnaround has been remarkable. They've shown great prowess on the battlefield. And look, Putin his military has shown extreme weaknesses from top to bottom, and it's been a great strategic failure on a number of counts. The question is, does he have any manpower and material left to really push back hard against the Ukrainians, because they continue to deplete Russian combat capability.
Right. I mean, Tobias, just in some news here, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky says 6,000 square kilometres of territory have now been seized back from Russian-occupied forces. That's a huge amount of territory that they've regained. And I've seen several maps of that whole southeast region, the Donbass, and you can just see great swathes of Ukrainian territory being taken back and Russians in apparent retreat. So they've got to, if they are going to retaliate in the way that you fear, they've got to get on with it, haven't they?
Yes, well, firstly, it's a pleasure to share a platform with my friend Mark. You're absolutely right to say, how would this retaliation take place? This is a textbook deception, almost like the D-Day landings when we were pretending to go to Calais, ended up in Normandy, and the Nazis had moved troops from Normandy up to Calais. You know, President Zelensky said he was going to Kherson, down east of Odessa, ends up in the north near Kharkiv, and pushed through 30 miles in, coming close to the Russian border. And the supply chains have collapsed, the Russian morale is depleted, poor equipment, as we've been discussing, ammunition's running low and so forth. But I make it very, very clear, Putin is in this for the long game. This is part of a wider strategy that we must get our heads around. We've moved into a new era of insecurity. So what happens in Ukraine today, this month, indeed this year, is actually part of a wider tapestry of events that I think are going to unfold in front of us. He's meeting President Xi next week once again. His key ally on the international stage here, no doubt will ask him for support as well. Putin, this is his war of choice. He can't afford to lose it, and he's going to come out fighting.
Dr. Esper, final word to you on this. Do you think the Ukrainians can win this war? And can they win it quite quickly, given what has been going on?
I absolutely think they can win this war. It won't be done quickly. You know, they have great momentum right now, but they have to be careful not to outrun their logistics and their ability to secure their lines of communication. At some point, the Russians will stop and dig in and defend. But the broader strategic issues are there, as was just outlined. You know, Putin is going to reach out to Xi Jinping, his strategic partner. You see some rumblings today in Armenia, where the Azerbaijanis are pushing against Russian partners. Maybe we'll see something happen in Georgia, where there's another frozen conflict. There's a much bigger geostrategic play here going on.
Got to leave it there. Dr. Esper and Tobias, well, thank you both very much indeed. Appreciate it. Quickly to your reaction. I mean, this would normally be the leading the news, I think, this story. Understandably, it's been slightly relegated because of what's happening here. But an extraordinary turn of events in Ukraine. And when I was there, the resilience from these people and determination not to give the Russians an inch was very palpable. It looks like they're carrying through on what they told me.
Well, I think as both those experts pointed out, this is a great moment to celebrate what they've done, but Putin remains a formidable opponent who can gather huge forces to hit back at some point. But I think this has been an amazing thing for the Ukrainians' morale, because what's incredibly important is their morale stays up, and the more wins they get, even if they get pushed back again, or, as I said, the war is not going to end anytime soon, keeping that morale is absolutely vital.
It reminds me a bit, I mean, Churchill's great quality was to persuade the British public that we could beat the Nazis, even when it appeared we hadn't got a chance. You feel that with Zelensky a little bit. I certainly do, that he has driven his people to a mindset where they believe they can win.
Well, I think there's no doubt that Zelensky was the sort of unforeseen factor in all this conflict, that he was seen as a bit of a joke figure because he'd been a television actor and all the rest of it. And he has absolutely risen to the moment, proved himself a very skillful communicator, both to his own people and to the rest of the world, and he survived. So I think all of that is very important, and it's also important that he has come out with some very, very strong statements against Putin and effectively laid down the conditions that he would accept, which are, really saying get out of Crimea and get out of Ukraine.
I think it's going to be a fascinating few weeks now to see if they can keep this momentum going, because if they do, and the Russians think they might be losing, Putin himself, his own position may come into peril from his own side. Which is what many people hope happens.
The only thing to worry about is it may be replaced by worse.
Well, of course.
More nationalist leader.
But you can't keep not doing things because you think worse may happen. You've got to take him on at some stage, and I love what's happening at the moment. Well, coming next, the late Queen is at Buckingham Palace for the final time. After being flown to London this evening, I'll talk to a pilot who used to fly the royal family around the world next. Welcome back. My next guest, Graham Laurie, flew the royal family around the world for more than 20 years, including flying the coffin of Princess Diana back after that horrible car crash in France in 1997. And he joins me now. Thank you so much for coming in today. It must have brought back memories to you today.
I was watching the coverage from Edinburgh Airport and I felt for the guys there. I mean, they've had probably 3-4 days to think about it. I had about 8 hours.
And how nerve-wracking is it when you're handed that kind of responsibility?
Well, I think because it's such a team effort, it involved, I mean, literally, our engineers, half an hour before we were due to take off, was the first we'd even thought about bringing the body back, because normally it would have come back day 4. And on, you know, the op order said day 4. And so they had to rush and change the fit of the... In fact, we changed the aircraft. It was easier. And
but when you're actually flying, Graham, something like the body of the Princess of Wales, the most famous woman in the world, after this horrendous crash, which shocked the world, really, what are you feeling as you're in the cockpit?
I think, you know, the shock was the thing that day. I mean, it was with everybody. The actual grief came later, I think. But you couldn't forget it. When we got airborne from Villa Coublay in Paris with the coffin in the hold, every single air trafficker that we spoke to said, please pass on our condolences to the Prince of Wales. Really? And go direct here. Well, we were trying to get the timing right to arrive at 7 o'clock in the evening. And we managed it.
You flew 2,200 trips for the royal family, including the Queen 90 times. When you heard the Queen had died, what were your feelings?
Very sad, obviously. But what the immediate thing that came to me, how lovely that 2 days before she was working hard, doing what? Her Majesty, the duty to the end. And I think the fact that it was then relatively quick, you know, I felt after all she had done for this country, that was probably the way she would have liked to have gone.
And you were King Charles's personal pilot. How do you feel he's doing as king? Early days. But what
when
do you think?
I saw that speech he made on Friday evening, I thought, that's how he's going to be. And I think he's going to do a splendid job. As people are all saying about the long apprenticeship. But,
it's true, though, isn't
you know, he's, let's face it, all the government papers have been going through him for 50 years. So he knows exactly how the country's run and what happens. You know, there's nothing new that you ought to be able to teach him there. And he's had plenty of time to just think about what's going on.
There was one little detail of what happened after you flew back Diana's coffin. Is you remember being invited to see Charles at Highgrove 2 days later, and the first thing he asked you was how you and your family were coping.
Yes, in fact, that was when I'd had the slight incident at Islay, not when I flew the Princess back. But yes, that again shows the man he was. We got this phone call at 8 o'clock in the morning from the police post at Highgrove. The Prince of Wales would like to speak to you in half an hour. He came on the phone, first question, how are your wife and family coping? With all the press coverage, obviously. And, you know, I eventually took the rap for that. Quite rightly, because I was captain of the aircraft. He did exactly as he was told by me that day.
It says a lot about him, I think, and thank you very much for your recollections. Greatly appreciated. Well, that's it for tonight. Thank you very much, Emily, Adam. I appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow night. That's it from me tonight, and the Queen is tonight back at Buckingham Palace for her last night ever at that great palace for this great monarch. Good night.
What was my biggest career moment? After spending about 25 years at Fleet Street, there's loads of stories I could tell you. But actually, I think I did an overnight show for Talk Radio in the early days, the night of the Brexit referendum. And that was actually quite a milestone because, of course, we started off thinking that Remain had won. And at 2:30, 2:45, after Nigel Farage had already said he'd lost, it turned out he hadn't lost. And it turned out we were leaving the European Union. So that was quite a shocker.
This is Talk TV News.
Good evening, I'm Zora Suleiman. Queen Elizabeth's coffin is now lying in rest at Buckingham Palace. The coffin, which was flown from Edinburgh earlier, was received by King Charles, the Queen Consort Camilla and other members of the royal family. The late Queen will now stay overnight at the palace before being moved across London to Westminster Hall tomorrow, where she will lie in state for 4 days before her funeral on Monday. Hundreds of thousands of mourners are expected to pay their respects, with the government warning the queue could exceed 30 hours. And the Princess Royal, who accompanied the Queen's coffin on its journey from Scotland to London, has issued a statement paying tribute to her late mother, writing that it had been an honour and a privilege to accompany her on her final journeys. That's all for now. We'll have more after the talk.